Hey guys, tonight we journey into the fragrant, mysterious world of ancient Egypt, where perfumes weren't just luxury items but essential parts of life, death, and everything in between. Picture yourself walking along the banks of the Nile River, the warm sun gently pressing down on your skin, the soft breeze carrying a subtle but intoxicating mix of blooming lotus flowers, fragrant jasmine, and the deep, resinous scent of myrrh. You're surrounded by the smells that defined an entire civilization crafted through secret knowledge passed down through generations, bottled in containers made from ostrich eggshells, of all things. You probably won't survive this without craving some seriously bizarre and beautiful scent combinations. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Perfume in ancient Egypt was far from a trivial luxury or a simple cosmetic. It was woven into the very fabric of their existence, as vital as the life-giving waters of the Nile or the sacred warmth of the sun god Ra. When you think of ancient Egyptian culture, images of towering pyramids, mysterious hieroglyphics, and glittering golden pharaohs usually come to mind first, but beneath all that grandeur, the very air they breathed was scented with carefully crafted fragrances that carried profound cultural and spiritual significance. The origins of Egyptian perfume stretch back thousands of years to at least 3000 BCE, and possibly even earlier. Archaeologists have uncovered delicate alabaster jars and small, intricately designed containers that once held precious oils distilled or extracted from a range of flowers and trees. These were not just random blends of smell, but highly refined compositions, each chosen for its unique scent and symbolic meaning. Imagine the meticulous process of gathering fresh petals of the sacred blue lotus, a flower that symbolized creation and rebirth, or the sweet scent of jasmine and roses, all harvested at just the right moment to capture their essence. For the Egyptians, perfume was liquid gold, a treasure that transcended mere smell. Historians still argue whether perfume initially served a primarily practical purpose, like helping to mask body odors in the hot, dusty climate of Egypt, or if it was always a spiritual practice, part of their complex rituals connecting the mortal world to the divine. Most likely it was both. The harsh environment made cleanliness and pleasant scent important for everyday life, but the Egyptians also believed strongly that certain fragrances could appease the gods and prepare the soul for the afterlife. What's truly fascinating is how the ancient Egyptians managed to extract these precious scents without the advanced distillation equipment we take for granted today. The techniques were surprisingly sophisticated for their time. They used methods such as maceration, where flower petals and herbs were soaked in fats or oils to absorb their fragrance slowly, and cold pressing, where plant materials were gently crushed to release their aromatic oils. These processes required great patience and precision. One wrong step and the entire batch could be ruined, wasting valuable resources. Often, perfumers would blend multiple ingredients like frankincense, myrrh, and cinnamon to create rich, layered scents that could be both sweet and spicy, woody and floral depending on the desired effect. But the story doesn't stop with just flowers and gums. The Egyptians' choice of containers for these perfumes was just as intriguing as the scents themselves. Among the most prized vessels were made from ostrich eggshells. You might wonder why an egg, especially from a bird not commonly found along the Nile, would be used to hold such precious liquids. Ostrich eggshells are remarkably strong and durable, almost like natural ceramic, with a smooth, glossy surface that protects the perfume inside from heat and light damage. These eggshells were often carefully cleaned, polished, and sometimes even decorated before being used. Beyond their practical qualities, ostrich eggs held symbolic meanings of fertility, life, and rebirth, adding an extra spiritual dimension to the perfume they contained. Holding one of these eggshell perfume bottles must have been an experience in itself, a fragile yet sturdy capsule of both earthly nature and divine essence. This connection to the natural world through birds, flowers, trees, and precious minerals perfectly reflects the Egyptian worldview. They saw life as an interconnected cycle, where everything from the smallest insect to the most powerful god had a role to play. Perfume was not frivolous or superficial. It was a tangible expression of these beliefs, a way to touch the divine through the senses. As you trudge deeper into this scent-soaked story, keep in mind that behind every ancient bottle lies a civilization's hope, devotion, and a dash of eccentricity. You'll soon meet the artisans who perfected this craft, the royals who flaunted their aromatic power, and the surprising ingredients, some delightful, others downright bizarre, that made Egyptian perfume history endlessly fascinating. There's even an ongoing scholarly debate about exactly how certain ingredients were sourced and combined. Some recipes are so complex and rare that experts are still trying to recreate them today. Perfume in ancient Egypt was also an art of social distinction. It wasn't something everyone could access equally. Certain scents were reserved for the elite, the priests, and the pharaohs themselves. The fragrance you wore could speak volumes about your status and your relationship to the divine. Imagine the difference between the perfume of a common worker and that of the queen herself. Smelling the right way was as important as dressing well or carrying the right jewellery. This scented language was part of everyday communication, subtle but powerful. And yet, perfume was not only about power and prestige, it was woven into the most intimate moments of life: childbirth, marriage, and mourning. The scent of particular flowers or resins could evoke memories, provide comfort, or mark transitions. Some perfumes were used in healing rituals or magic spells, where the aroma was thought to carry protective or curative properties. Modern science has even found that some of these ancient ingredients do possess antimicrobial qualities, showing that the Egyptians were onto something far beyond vanity. So as you settle in for this 2-hour adventure through ancient Egypt's fragrant past, remember that what may seem like just a pleasant smell to us was, for them, a bridge between worlds, earth and heaven, life and death, the mundane and the sacred. It was an invisible art that spoke volumes without words, and of course, it was sometimes downright weird, because if there's one thing the Egyptians loved, it was mixing the mysterious with the practical, the sacred with the strange. In the next sections, we'll delve deeper into the mysterious art of scent extraction, meet the craftsmen behind the perfumes, explore the surprising ingredients that went into the blends, and even find out why ostrich eggshells were more than just pretty containers. You'll learn about perfume's place in religious rituals, daily life, and the afterlife, and discover why historians still debate many aspects of this aromatic legacy. So get ready to follow the trail of ancient aromas that once filled the air around the pyramids and palaces, and still echo faintly in modern fragrance traditions. You're still wandering along the sun-baked banks of the Nile, the air thick with the mingled scents of papyrus, mud, and wildflowers. But now your attention is drawn to something quite unexpected. Enormous, glossy ostrich eggshells scattered here and there like rare treasures from another world. Believe it or not, these giant eggs were central to ancient Egypt's perfume culture. Not as exotic food, though some lucky souls may have cracked them open for a special meal, but as the most prized vessels for storing perfumes and aromatic oils. The very idea of perfume held inside an eggshell might strike you as quirky today, but for the Egyptians this was a genius blend of practicality, symbolism, and artistry. Why ostrich eggshells, you ask? Let's start with the basics. Ostrich eggs are enormous, one of the largest eggs laid by any bird alive or extinct. Their shells are remarkably thick and sturdy, far tougher than your average chicken egg. This toughness made them perfect natural containers, capable of withstanding the harsh desert climate. Imagine trying to keep precious scented oils safe in a simple clay pot under the blazing Egyptian sun. Your perfume would evaporate or spoil within hours. But an ostrich eggshell is like a natural perfume safe, designed by evolution itself to shield the delicate liquid inside from heat, light, and air exposure. Not only that, but their smooth, pale surface could be polished until it gleamed, and sometimes these eggshells were even decorated with fine carvings, painted patterns, or gold leaf, transforming them from mere containers into miniature works of art. Owning a perfume bottle made from an ostrich eggshell was not just about storage. It was a statement of status, spirituality, and aesthetic appreciation. Acquiring these eggshells was no small feat. Ostriches were not common around the lush Nile Valley. Most ostrich eggshells came from the desert fringes or from trade routes, stretching into Nubia or farther south and west. That the Egyptians went to such lengths to obtain these eggshells tells you just how much they valued the perfumes they held inside. The eggshell was a perfect marriage of function and symbolism. Their use in perfume containers demonstrates a level of environmental savvy and cultural meaning that continues to fascinate historians today. Historians still argue over whether the primary appeal of ostrich eggshells was practical, symbolic, or a little bit of both. On the one hand, their natural durability and near impermeability to air and light made them ideal for protecting the precious, often volatile scented oils. On the other, ostrich eggs held deep symbolic meanings in Egyptian culture. They represented fertility, life, and cosmic order, concepts deeply woven into Egyptian religion and worldview. In many tomb paintings and carvings, ostrich eggs are depicted as symbols of creation, rebirth, and the eternal cycle of life and death. So holding an ostrich eggshell perfume bottle might have felt like clutching a tiny universe of life, scent, and spiritual power all at once. But what about the perfume itself? The contents of these eggshell containers were no ordinary concoctions. These were carefully formulated blends of resins, oils, and floral extracts, crafted by skilled artisans known as perfumers. The recipes were often closely guarded secrets, passed down through generations, and their creation involved a painstaking process of harvesting raw materials, extracting fragrant oils, and blending them into harmonious mixtures. Common ingredients included frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and a variety of flowers such as blue lotus and jasmine. Some perfumes were purely floral and sweet, others spicy and woody, often layered to evoke complex sensory experiences. The art of perfume making was itself a sacred craft. Perfumers were not just artisans but held religious roles, as fragrance was essential to temple rituals, offerings, and ceremonies. The scent was believed to please the gods and purify the space, making the perfume vessel, like the ostrich eggshell, part of a larger sacred ecosystem. Interestingly, ostrich eggshells were not limited to perfume storage. Archaeologists have uncovered beads and small bowls crafted from the same material, suggesting a versatile use of this remarkable natural resource. Yet, it is their use as perfume containers that captivates us most, because it reflects an intersection of natural science, art, and spirituality that feels uniquely Egyptian. The eggshell's influence did not end in Egypt. As trade and cultural exchange spread through the Mediterranean and Near East, the concept of natural, elegant containers for perfume travelled with it. In fact, some historians trace the design inspiration for later glass perfume bottles back to these early ostrich eggshell vessels. Even modern luxury perfume brands sometimes reference ancient shapes and materials to evoke a timeless, almost mystical sense of fragrance. So the next time you hold a perfume bottle, pause for a moment and imagine the ancient counterpart. A smooth, resilient ostrich eggshell, polished to a shine, carrying inside it the scents of sacred flowers and resins, a physical link to a world where smell was a vital thread in the tapestry of life, death, and divinity. It's a reminder that the marriage of nature, culture, and craft is as old as civilization itself, and sometimes comes in the most surprising packages. As you continue to wander through the scented corridors of ancient Egypt's past, the image of those sturdy ostrich eggshell perfume bottles still fresh in your mind, your curiosity now turns to the true masterminds behind this fragrant art, the perfumers themselves. These individuals were far from casual dabblers or hobbyists. They were highly trained specialists who combined early chemistry, botany, artistry, and spiritual ritual into a craft that was just as complex and respected as any modern perfume industry today. Imagine stepping into a dimly lit workshop somewhere in Thebes or Memphis, where the air is thick with the mingled aromas of dried herbs, resins, and fresh flowers. Rows of alabaster jars line the walls, each containing precious ingredients carefully gathered from distant lands. The soft flicker of oil lamps illuminates the perfumer's tools, mortar and pestle, clay bowls, wooden presses, and the perfumer themselves, a figure both scientist and priest, carefully weighing ingredients and murmuring prayers to invoke the gods' blessings. Perfumers occupied a unique social and religious role in ancient Egypt. They were both craftsmen and spiritual mediators, entrusted with a sacred responsibility. Their knowledge was closely guarded, often passed down within temple circles or specific families. Unlike many crafts in the ancient world, women frequently held prominent positions as perfumers. Royal women, priestesses, and temple attendants were sometimes charged with creating the exclusive fragrances worn by the pharaoh and the elite. This blend of gender roles in perfume making is still the subject of scholarly discussion, as Egypt was unusual in granting women such important cultural authority. You might wonder whether these artisans considered themselves scientists, artists, or religious specialists, or perhaps something that defies modern categories altogether. Historians still debate this, as their work crossed boundaries we now view as distinct. The technical methods used by these ancient perfumers were surprisingly sophisticated. While steam distillation, the process most commonly associated with essential oil extraction, would not be fully developed until many centuries later, the Egyptians had mastered other ingenious ways to capture scent. One particularly laborious technique was on fleurage, a method that involved placing fresh flower petals on layers of animal fat or oil, and allowing the fragrance to slowly seep into the fat over several days or even weeks. The perfumer would carefully replace the spent petals with fresh ones, repeatedly, patiently infusing the fat with delicate floral aromas. Imagine standing over a large basin of warm fat, gently layering petals day after day as a faint but intoxicating scent slowly filled the room, a process that required tremendous patience, precision, and a refined sense of smell. Cold pressing was another extraction method, typically used for seeds and nuts, where mechanical pressure would release oils without heating or damaging them. This was especially important for delicate or volatile ingredients whose scent profiles could be ruined by heat. Some experimental distillation-like methods involving soaking plants and gently heating the mixtures might have been employed, but full steam distillation was still centuries away. Despite these limitations, Egyptian perfumers managed to produce concentrated aromatic oils that captured the essence of their raw materials remarkably well, showing a deep understanding of the properties of different plants and resins. The resulting perfumes were much more than mere cosmetic luxuries. They played essential roles in religious ceremonies, funerary rituals, and the daily life of the elite. Priests used fragrant oils and incense to purify temples and statues, believing that pleasing scents could attract and appease the gods. Nobles bathed in perfumed oils to showcase their status, but also as a means of spiritual purification and personal protection. Even children and animals were anointed with gentle fragrances, underscoring how deeply the Egyptians integrated scent into their understanding of life and wellness. The palette of ingredients reads like an ancient world tour of aromas. Frankincense, sourced from the Arabian deserts, was prized for its sweet, woody smell and spiritual potency. Myrrh, harvested from thorny shrubs in African scrublands, provided a warm, resinous base. Cinnamon, exotic and highly valued, came from far-flung tropical regions beyond Egypt's borders, a testament to the extensive trade networks the Egyptians maintained. Native flowers, such as the sacred blue lotus, famous for its intoxicating aroma and mild psychoactive effects, iris, coriander, and others, also played starring roles. This global ingredient list reflects not only a refined olfactory taste, but also Egypt's far-reaching economic and cultural connections. Here's a fun little twist for you. Some of the ingredients included substances that might make modern noses recoil a bit. The Egyptians sometimes added animal secretions like civet, a musky glandular secretion from a small carnivorous mammal, or musk from deer. While pungent when raw, these ingredients were prized for their strong, lingering scents and remain valuable in perfumery to this day. You might also recall that Egyptians famously used crocodile dung in sunscreen, blending the practical with the bizarre, a reminder that their approach to natural materials was far from squeamish. One of the great puzzles for historians today is how many of these ancient perfumes could be truly recreated. Many of the original recipes, written in hieroglyphics on papyrus, are incomplete or ambiguous, and some of the plants and resins have become rare or extinct. Modern perfumers and scholars have tried experimental reconstructions, but these efforts blend archaeological evidence with guesswork and artistic interpretation. Historians still debate whether we can ever fully experience the scents that once filled Egyptian temples and palaces, or if they remain forever lost to time. But what remains indisputable is the extraordinary dedication of Egyptian perfumers to creating more than just pleasant aromas. They sought to capture spiritual essences and bridge the mortal with the divine through scent. Their perfumes connected people to gods, to nature, and to one another in a sensory language that transcended words. Bottled in those fragile ostrich eggshells, these fragrances carried not only smell but meaning, ritual, status, protection, and magic. So, as you imagine these ancient workshops, Fragrant and shadowy, filled with the patient toil of the perfumer, remember that this was a craft that combined science, art, and spirituality in a way that still captivates us thousands of years later. The perfumes of ancient Egypt weren't just smells, they were sacred expressions of a civilization's deepest hopes, fears, and beliefs. You continue your journey deeper into ancient Egypt's sensory world, where the power of scent takes center stage in religious life. Step with me now into the massive temple complexes, where towering stone pylons open onto broad courtyards bathed in sunlight and heavy with swirling incense smoke. The air here is thick with the fragrant haze of burning resins and crushed flowers, drifting upward in slow curling tendrils. As you move beneath soaring columns, the faint echo of priestly chants reaches your ears, soft and rhythmic, while the whisper of linen robes brushes against carved stone. In these sacred spaces, perfume is no mere luxury or decoration. It is a powerful ritual tool, a bridge between human and divine, the invisible thread linking earth to heaven. In the ancient Egyptian temple, scent was considered a direct way to please and communicate with the gods. The burning of incense, particularly frankincense and myrrh, was a spiritual act, thought to awaken divine presence and invite gods to dwell among the people. This aromatic smoke was not just a background fragrance, but a sacred offering, a message of reverence sent upward with each rising curl of smoke. The sweet, resinous smell symbolized purity, protection, and the sacred order of the universe itself. Priests were the keepers of this fragrant knowledge. They prepared and administered perfumes and incense using carefully guarded recipes, blending rare resins, aromatic woods, oils, and crushed flowers with precision and reverence. These mixtures varied by ritual and deity, tailored to create a sensory experience that both sanctified the temple and purified its occupants. Sometimes incense was burned on altars, producing thick clouds of fragrant smoke that filled every corner of the temple halls. At other times, perfumed oils were anointed onto statues, temple walls, and even the priests' bodies, suffusing everything with sacred scent. The importance of perfume extended beyond ritual use into the very architecture of temples. Many sacred sites contained special perfume chambers where precious aromatic substances were stored in alabaster jars, often sealed inside ostrich eggshells to preserve their delicate scents from the heat and dryness of the desert. These perfume caches were treasures as valuable as gold, meticulously guarded as symbols of divine favor and spiritual wealth. The design of temples may have even been intended to carry these fragrances through their halls, using the natural flow of air to create a scented atmosphere guiding worshippers toward the inner sanctum. Such a sensory experience was intended to elevate and transform the worshipper, turning the act of entering a temple into an immersion in divine presence. Scholars have proposed that the Egyptians' use of scent in sacred spaces was an early form of scent architecture, where fragrance was part of the spatial design, enhancing the emotional and spiritual impact of rituals. Perfume and incense also played a central role in Egyptian funerary customs. Death was understood as a transition rather than an end, and the preservation and sanctification of the body through embalming with fragrant balms was essential for the journey into the afterlife. Tombs were often filled with jars of perfumes and incense to comfort the deceased and protect against evil forces. The smells of embalming resins and aromatic oils were believed to help awaken the soul and ensure rebirth, a fragrant promise of eternal life. This intimate relationship between fragrance, life, death, and rebirth reflects a broader Egyptian worldview where the practical and the spiritual were deeply intertwined. Blue lotus, with its intoxicating scent, symbolized regeneration and appeared in both funerary art and perfume recipes. Its aroma was thought to stimulate the spirit, aiding in resurrection. Many of the key perfume ingredients came from far beyond Egypt's borders, highlighting the extensive trade networks that linked Egypt to Arabia, Africa, and beyond. Frankincense was harvested in the deserts of southern Arabia, while myrrh came from thorny trees in East Africa, and cinnamon reached Egypt from far-flung tropical lands. These exotic imports were prized not only for their scent, but as symbols of Egypt's wealth and connections with the wider world. Art and iconography reinforce perfume's sacred status. Depictions of gods holding ostrich eggshell vessels filled with perfume, or incense burners emitting divine smoke, emphasize that these fragrances were more than earthly luxuries. They were gifts and tools of divine interaction. Yet historians still debate many aspects of these scented rituals. How literally did ancient Egyptians believe in the power of fragrance? Did specific gods have preferred scents? How did ordinary people experience and participate in these fragrant rites compared to priests and elites? The answers remain elusive, wrapped in the mysteries of a civilization that continues to captivate us. Standing amidst the imagined haze of incense and perfume in an ancient temple, it's clear that scent was a powerful medium, a language beyond words that linked mortals and gods, body and spirit, life and eternity. This fragrant connection remains one of ancient Egypt's most enchanting and enduring legacies. You've wandered through the temples, inhaled the sacred smoke of incense, and glimpsed the precious perfumes stored away in alabaster jars sealed with ostrich eggshells. Now, let's step away from the grand temples and royal courts and find ourselves amid the everyday bustle of ancient Egyptian life. Picture a vibrant village on the Nile's fertile banks, or the busy streets of Thebes and Memphis, where life thrums with markets, craftsmen and families. In this world, scent wasn't just the privilege of priests or pharaohs. It was woven into daily routines, personal care, social identity, and even survival. First, imagine the Egyptian obsession with cleanliness. This wasn't about vanity, but a profound belief that physical cleanliness was essential to spiritual purity. Bathing was a regular ritual, sometimes daily, using water from the Nile or nearby wells. After scrubbing away the dust and sweat of the hot desert sun, people would anoint their skin with fragrant oils. These oils did more than moisturize cracked skin. They masked natural body odors in a climate that could be unforgivingly hot and dry. But there was also a deeper significance. Applying scented oil was a way to connect with the divine, to align oneself with Ma'at, the cosmic order of balance and harmony. The oils themselves were precious. Mixed from a base like castor or sesame oil, they were infused with aromatic plants, juniper, cedar, cinnamon, myrrh and flowers like the blue lotus. The resulting perfumes were complex and varied, ranging from sweet and floral to sharp and resinous. The process of applying these oils was deliberate and almost meditative. Slow movements, gentle massaging into the skin or hair, a private moment of self-care amidst the busyness of life. Picture a noblewoman in her elegant home, reclining on a divan, as attendants delicately massage fragrant oils into her arms and neck. The soft music from a harp plays in the background. It's a scene of refined luxury, but it also tells a story of social status, beauty ideals, and health. Meanwhile, a scribe at his writing desk might pause briefly to dab oil onto his wrists or temples, using scent to calm nerves and project confidence. Perfume was also a language of social distinction. Certain fragrances were markers of class and profession. Royalty and priests favoured the rarest and most exotic scents, ingredients that had travelled thousands of miles along ancient trade routes. Meanwhile, merchants and artisans used more locally sourced, modest blends. Fragrance functioned almost like an invisible garment, communicating your rank, occupation, and even your personal style. Wearing perfume could be a form of social currency. The Egyptians extended this fragrant obsession beyond their bodies. Homes were scented with incense to keep malevolent spirits away and to create a pleasant atmosphere. Clothing, especially for the wealthy, was often washed and perfumed to maintain freshness. Hair and wigs, crucial elements of Egyptian fashion and identity, were treated with perfumed oils to keep them soft, shiny, and insect-free. Yes, in a desert environment, some oils served a practical purpose. They repelled pests and protected the scalp from drying out. Interestingly, some of the scents the Egyptians prized would surprise modern noses. Resinous cedarwood or sharp juniper oils, for instance, could smell strong or even medicinal today. But for Egyptians, these scents symbolized cleansing and protection. Their sensory world was different, and what we might find pungent, they found invigorating and pure. Not all Egyptians had access to luxurious perfumes made from imported ingredients like frankincense or cinnamon. Many common folk likely crafted their own simpler scents from herbs, flowers, and oils available locally. This homemade perfume culture hints at a broader and more democratic use of scent than one might assume. Still, historians debate exactly how widespread perfume use was among lower classes and how it shaped everyday identity. Another intriguing use of scent was in medical and magical practices. Certain oils and incense were believed to have healing powers, or to ward off evil spirits. The line between perfume, medicine, and magic was often blurred. For example, juniper and cedar oils, besides smelling sharp, were used in treatments and rituals for protection. This combination of practical and mystical use shows how deeply embedded scent was in Egyptian life. So, whether you were a pharaoh preparing for a grand ceremony, a priest anointing a temple statue, or a potter dusting off your hands and applying scented oil after a day's work, perfume was an essential part of life. It was a source of comfort, a mark of status, a spiritual tool, and a daily pleasure. It connected Egyptians to each other and to the gods, carried on the invisible wings of fragrance. Historians still argue about many aspects of ancient Egyptian perfume culture. How did different social classes perceive and use scent? What exactly did these perfumes mean to ordinary people? Were some scents more about practical benefits, like insect repellency, than pure luxury? The evidence is patchy, and much remains to be uncovered, but what's clear is that perfume was far from a frivolous indulgence. It was woven deeply into the sensory, social, and spiritual fabric of Egyptian life. As you imagine the smells of this ancient world, the mingling of dusty earth, fresh water, perfumed oils, and burning incense, you begin to understand how perfume was a vital living thread connecting the daily to the divine, the practical to the mystical, the individual to society. It was the invisible, fragrant signature of a civilization that continues to captivate and inspire. You've been drifting through ancient courtyards and bustling markets, soaking in the scents of sacred rituals and everyday life. But now it's time to slip deeper, into the heart of Egyptian craftsmanship, into the smoke-wreathed chambers where perfumes were born. This isn't the glamorous world of royal courts, or the soothing quiet of home anointments. This is the behind-the-scenes world of the perfumers, the masters of aroma, the silent artists who turned raw plants and mysterious resins into liquid luxury. And their workspace? Less sleek apothecary, more olfactory laboratory mixed with a touch of spellcraft. Imagine it. A shaded stone room tucked behind a temple complex or a tucked-away corner of a noble estate. The sun barely filters through a narrow window slit. The air inside is dense, aromatic, almost dizzying. Wooden tables are worn smooth from generations of use. Every surface is a landscape of tools, bronze spatulas, carved stone bowls, linen-wrapped sieves, long-handled stirrers, and rows of vessels, some made of clay, others of delicate glass, alabaster, or even carefully carved ostrich eggshells. You can almost smell it now, can't you? A rich swirl of myrrh, cinnamon, lotus, and a sharp touch of juniper. It's not just scent, it's atmosphere. This is where the magic of transformation happens. But make no mistake, these perfumers weren't just tossing flowers into oil and hoping for the best. No, this was deliberate, technical, and deeply sacred work. The first step, the base oil. Egyptians favoured castor oil, moringa oil, or sesame oil. Thick, stable carriers with mild, natural scents that wouldn't overpower the ingredients soaked into them. These oils were gently heated over low flames in bronze pans, stirred constantly to prevent burning. Too much heat, and the oil spoiled. Too little, and the scent wouldn't release. It was a fine balance, honed through generations. Once the oil reached the right temperature, the aromatic ingredients were added. Think of frankincense resin, finely ground cinnamon bark, crushed blue lotus petals, dried marjoram, and even rare spices like cardamom and galangal. The chosen mix steeped for hours, sometimes days. Some blends were shaken daily, others stirred in moonlight, with whispered prayers. The result was an infusion of scent, subtle, complex, and surprisingly long-lasting. And here's the fascinating part. Some evidence suggests the Egyptians may have experimented with early forms of distillation, or enfleurage. While they didn't have modern distillation equipment, they likely used low-heat techniques to extract the essence of a substance without burning it. The process may have involved clay vessels with woven lids and condensation via cold water or sand. It's a scholarly debate. Some insist the process was crude at best. Others point to surviving residues and inscriptions that hint at surprisingly sophisticated chemistry. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in between. What's undeniable is that these perfumers had a stunning array of ingredients at their disposal. Through their powerful trade networks, they sourced frankincense and myrrh from Punt. believed to be in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia, cinnamon and cassia, possibly from South Asia, and sweet-smelling benzoin resin from Southeast Asia. Locally, they gathered plants like mint, sweet flag, juniper berries, and sacred blue lotus flowers from the Nile marshes. All of this would be ground, crushed, and blended with care. Mortars and pestles carved from basalt or alabaster were essential tools. Delicate sieves made from linen or finely woven reeds helped filter out sediment. The result was a smooth, deeply fragrant oil that could be stored, worn, or offered to the gods. And what did they store these precious blends in? Enter the humble but elegant ostrich egg. You wouldn't think something so fragile could be used as a perfume container, but ostrich eggshells are surprisingly strong when intact. They were hollowed, cleaned, and sealed with wax or cork stoppers. Their naturally cool interiors helped preserve volatile oils, and their size made them ideal for small batch, high-value perfumes. Some eggshell vessels were etched or painted, suggesting they were gifted between nobles or used for special ceremonial purposes. This wasn't all happening in a corner of someone's house either. In some places, perfumery reached a semi-industrial scale. The Temple of Edfu, for example, includes detailed inscriptions describing perfume production. Some of these recipes mention 16 or more ingredients and processes that could take over a week, including grinding at sunrise, soaking under moonlight, and stirring during specific lunar phases. The lines between chemistry and religious ritual blurred completely. One of the most iconic and mysterious Egyptian perfumes was Kai-Fi. You've heard the name before, maybe in a documentary or drifting past you in a museum. But Kifi was more than a scent. It was a blend of perfume, incense, and medicine. The recipes varied, but most included ingredients like raisins, honey, wine, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, cardamom, and pine resin. It was a sticky, dark, intoxicating paste that could be burned, worn, or even ingested in tiny amounts. Making Kai-Fi wasn't just about smell, it was about transformation, intention, and time. The process of creating Kai-Fi often began with soaking raisins in wine, then blending that with honey and gradually mixing in powdered spices and resins. Some ingredients were softened with water or oil, then mashed to a smooth consistency. The final result had a heady, spicy sweet scent said to calm the nerves and promote restful sleep. Historians still debate the exact recipe. No two ancient inscriptions list the same ingredients. Some recipes read like alchemical instructions, others are poetic and symbolic, making interpretation a challenge. So, who are the people creating all of this? The perfumers of Egypt weren't always anonymous. Some inscriptions list them by name. Others suggest they were part of priestly orders, responsible not just for making the perfumes, but for using them in temple rites. Still others may have worked independently, supplying households or local markets. Whether high-ranking artisans or humble specialists, they commanded knowledge that blended botany, trade, ritual, and precise technique. Their status remains somewhat unclear. Some scholars believe perfumers were considered a kind of sacred technician, like scribes, respected for their specialized skills. Others suggest their standing varied by region and patron. Either way, their work endured, from their mixtures smeared on tomb walls to the residue found inside sealed vessels unearthed 3,000 years later. And here's the final twist. We can still smell some of these perfumes today. Thanks to chemical analysis, archaeologists have recreated the scent profiles of certain ancient blends, including one discovered in a tomb near Saqqara. Using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, researchers identified residues of myrrh, balsam, and other ingredients. In a modern lab, perfumers replicated the scent, and it was rich, earthy, and hauntingly beautiful. Imagine inhaling that scent now, knowing it's the same bouquet someone wore 3,200 years ago. It lingers, defying time, a message carried not by ink but by air. And you're just drifting through it. No mixing bowl needed. The perfume's made, the scent hangs thick and luxurious, and now, what do you do with it? If you're an ancient Egyptian, that's not even a question. Perfume isn't just a finishing touch to your outfit or something you dab behind your ears before a dinner party. No, in ancient Egypt, perfume is life. It's how you speak to the gods, how you enter society, how you present yourself to the afterlife. It's a social marker, a religious necessity, and a physical comfort, all rolled into one sweet-smelling smear. And so, as you step away from the perfumer's workshop, the story continues, not in the laboratory, but in temples, tombs, banquets, and bedrooms. You follow the perfume on its journey through ancient Egyptian life, watching how it is worn, gifted, worshipped, and woven into the fabric of everyday existence. Let's start at the top. The temples. If there's one thing ancient Egypt took seriously, it was the maintenance of Ma'at, the divine cosmic balance. And part of that maintenance involved daily rituals where perfume was just as important as incense, chanting, or offerings of bread and beer. The gods didn't just enjoy scent, they demanded it. You see priests entering the inner sanctum of a temple at dawn, freshly bathed and shaven, wearing pristine linen. But that wasn't enough. Before they approached the god statue, they would anoint themselves with sacred oils, frankincense for purity, myrrh for protection, kaifi for calming the divine temper. Some temple recipes, inscribed right on the walls, dictated that these oils be made in specific phases of the moon and stirred while hymns were sung. It wasn't just chemistry, it was choreography. And the god statues themselves were often anointed with perfume multiple times a day as part of their ceremonial meals. The scent helped awaken the divine essence believed to dwell inside the idol. In this way, perfume wasn't an accessory, it was a sacred key. Then there's daily life. Picture a noblewoman preparing for a festival. She's seated in her courtyard, shaded by a fig tree, servants attending to her. After a bath and an application of skin-softening oils, she selects a cone of scented wax, made of animal fat blended with perfume. She places the cone atop her braided wig. Over time, the wax slowly melts, releasing fragrance as it does. You catch hints of lotus, cinnamon, and almond as the wax warms under the sun. By the time she arrives at the party, the entire courtyard knows she's entered. Scent is her signature. And it wasn't just for the elite. Workers, scribes, and merchants all made use of fragrance in daily hygiene. A dab of myrrh oil kept sweat odours in check under the scorching sun. Women added perfumed ointments to their beauty routines. Some even chewed aromatic resins like frankincense or mastic to freshen their breath, because nothing ruins a flirty glance quite like sand-blasted morning mouth. Perfume also found its place in love and seduction. Love poems from the New Kingdom reference the smell of a beloved's skin or hair. One verse reads, "My love is like sweet oil on the fingers of the harpist." Another sighs, "Her scent is better than all spices." Imagine being so fragrant that you end up immortalized in verse. Modern colognes could never, and of course, fragrance marked class. If you smelled like imported cinnamon or blue lotus, people knew you had money. Poorer Egyptians relied on simpler balms made from herbs like mint or marjoram, or from leftovers of temple blends sold off by enterprising priests. Still, the idea was the same. Scent equaled refinement. But perhaps nowhere was perfume more potent, or more permanent, than in the rituals of death. Here you are now, standing beside a mummification table. The room is dark, humid, and filled with the acrid sweet scent of resins. You watch embalmers coat a body in myrrh-soaked linens, then fill the empty chest cavity with aromatic herbs and spices. Perfume isn't just for covering decomposition, it's part of the sacred process of transformation. The body must be purified, sweetened, prepared for eternity. Even the burial shroud is perfumed, and small jars of fragrant oil are placed in the tomb, along with cones of kifi or incense bricks, meant to please the gods and comfort the ka, the spiritual double of the deceased. Ostrich egg vessels again make an appearance here, sealed and tucked among golden jewellery and amulets. They carry with them not just scent, but memory. A whiff of perfume was a sensory bridge between the living and the dead, a way of remembering the smell of someone long gone. It was immortality in oil form. Historians still argue over exactly how perfumes were used in funeral rites, whether the anointing was purely symbolic or if it had deeper magical purposes. Some believe the types of oils varied by social class or region. Others suggest that priests had secret blends used only for royalty. The line between fact and ritual is, as always, pleasingly blurry. And don't forget medicine. Ancient medical papyri like the Ebers papyrus are filled with fragrant prescriptions. Got a headache? Try a poultice of crushed lotus petals and cedar oil. Suffering from indigestion? Chew some myrrh mixed with honey. Fragrance wasn't just aesthetic, it had therapeutic value. Whether the effect was pharmacological or psychological is still up for debate, but the Egyptians firmly believed in the healing power of smell. Even political gestures were scented. Pharaohs sent vials of perfume as diplomatic gifts. Ramses II famously shipped gallons of kifi to temples across the empire to keep the gods happy and maintain divine favour. It was part bribery, part devotion. And foreign dignitaries arriving in Egypt would be offered perfume as a gesture of hospitality and alliance, because nothing says welcome like a flask of resin-infused sesame oil. You begin to understand that in this world, perfume was not a luxury, it was infrastructure. Like bread or beer, it showed up in every corner of life. But unlike those things, it evaporated. It danced through time, invisible but unforgettable. And so, as the sun sets over a bustling market square and the streets cool just enough to invite the breeze, the scent lingers, on skin, in linen, in memory. You breathe it in, a whisper of blue lotus, a flicker of frankincense, the barest hint of cinnamon bark. It's not just perfume, it's presence. It's proof that someone lived, someone loved, someone prayed, someone hoped, and just like that, it vanishes. Now, with the perfume absorbed into every layer of ancient life, from temple to tomb, let's pivot to something a little odder. Because here's the truth. Ancient Egypt didn't just smell beautiful. It also smelled weird. Comforting, exotic, yes, but sometimes downright bizarre. And no moment reveals that better than when you take a closer sniff at their more unusual scent sources. Tonight we're wading into the aromatic underworld. Crocodile dung, fish guts and sweat-slicked linen. You might want to hold your nose. Let's start with the eyebrow-raising fact that some early perfumes and ointments didn't exactly come from flowers and sunshine. No, some ingredients would get you kicked out of a modern perfume lab on day one. One of the most notorious, crocodile dung, yep, actual crocodile dung dried and pulverized, often mixed with oil or resin. Scholars still argue whether it was genuinely used for scent, or whether it functioned more as a base, preservative, or even an apotropaic charm. Basically, magical protection. Either way, it ended up in some ointments, including, disturbingly, a few recipes allegedly linked to fertility rituals. Just imagine rubbing that on your skin and hoping for romance. Then there's civet, the glandular secretion of the African civet cat. If you've ever worn a vintage perfume and thought, why does this smell like someone's armpit dipped in incense? You may have civet to thank. It was prized not because it smelled good raw, it doesn't, but because once diluted it added an earthy, sensual depth that made floral and resinous perfumes stick. Civet glands were traded across North Africa and may have been incorporated into elite Egyptian blends, though, again, the evidence is fragmentary and debated. Historians still can't agree whether civet was used regularly or just in rare concoctions for royalty. Now imagine yourself in a corner stall of the ancient Theban market. It's noisy. There's a donkey braying somewhere. A child's crying over a dropped pomegranate. You sidestep a merchant selling fish oil by the amphora, and it hits you, the smell. Rancid, sharp, thick as fog. Fish oil was used as a base in some cheaper, more pungent ointments. While the elite could afford moringa or castor oil, the lower classes often made do with what was available, and fish, abundant and oily, was available in spades. The resulting ointments were medicinal, certainly, and in the right combination, even pleasant, eventually. But that initial whiff? Let's just say your nose earns its hazard pay. The ancient Egyptians also had a thing for sweat. Not in a post-gym freshness kind of way, but in a way that deeply entwined body scent with personal identity. Some sources suggest that used linen, yes, worn linen garments soaked with a person's body scent, might be kept or repurposed into love charms or ingredients in magical ointments. There's even mention of a woman who carried her lover's perfumed loincloth around as a keepsake. The logic was simple. If scent held memory and power, then used garments were essentially bottled essence. Your laundry hamper, it turns out, could be a ritual site. Even some of their floral choices would turn a few heads today. The blue lotus, often seen floating beside royal noses in tomb paintings, is beautiful, but not exactly sweet. It has an earthy, slightly fermented scent, with psychoactive properties. When steeped in wine or oil, it produces a mildly narcotic effect. Egyptians probably used it as both perfume and aphrodisiac. So when you see an elegant woman at a banquet with a blue lotus pinned to her wig, it's not just fashion, it's pharmacology. She's there to relax, unwind, and possibly have visions. And don't get too romantic about those scented cones either. You remember those waxy cones that melt slowly over the head, releasing perfume throughout the night? They sound divine, and they might have been. But there's still debate about whether they existed as portrayed in art. For years, scholars thought the cones were symbolic, representations of bliss or abundance. Then, in 2019, actual residue of a waxy substance matching perfume cones was discovered on mummified bodies. So yes, they were real, and yes, people walked around with scented wax slowly oozing through their wigs. Glamorous? Maybe. Practical? Less so, especially in the heat. Let's hope nobody leaned too far forward. Even the divine had their odd preferences. Some temple rituals included burning animal fats as part of incense offerings. This wasn't about scent alone. It was a way to connect with the primordial world, the pre-creation chaos where scent and smoke bridged the mortal and divine. So next time you think your neighbour's barbecue is getting out of hand, imagine it wafting through a golden temple while priests chant hymns in linen robes. Let's not forget Kaifi again, the so-called crown jewel of Egyptian fragrance. It was sweet, yes, but also musty, smoky, resinous, with layers of raisin, wine, honey, and the occasional whiff of medicine cabinet herbs. Not everyone would have found it pleasant. In fact, some modern recreations of Kaifi come with a warning: not recommended for enclosed spaces. Still, it had its purpose, calming the gods, warding off nightmares, and according to one inscription, making the house pleasant until dawn. Of course, not all smells were intentional. The Nile Delta came with its own background perfume: stagnant water, silt, animal dung, and whatever the wind brought in from nearby markets. Life was aromatic in all directions. You didn't just apply perfume to smell good, you applied it to survive the daily onslaught of less flattering aromas. It was defensive beauty. Even cleaning agents were fragrant. Soap as we know it didn't exist yet, but Egyptians used natron, a mineral salt, as a cleanser, and often added scented oils afterward to offset its drying effects. Some bathed in water steeped with herbs or flower petals. One recipe for a skin balm included olive oil mixed with crushed coriander and fennel. Basic, yes, but effective, and you'd walk away from your bath smelling like an herb garden in the breeze. So you see, scent in Egypt wasn't always elegant or graceful. It was sometimes gritty, strange, experimental, and very, very human. That's part of what makes it so captivating. It's not just jasmine garlands and perfume jars, it's sweat and fish guts, lotus dreams and lion fat incense. It's real. And still, it draws you in, through time, through decay, through every odd little moment. Because even the weirdest smells, when woven into memory, become something beautiful. You exhale, catching a final breath of blue lotus, a shimmer of myrrh and yes, maybe even a whiff of something fishy. You followed the scent through temples and tombs, feasts and funerals, and even past a few fishy detours. But now, let's talk about how this olfactory empire didn't stay bottled up in the Nile Valley. No, the fragrances of Egypt travelled. They wafted across deserts, packed in sealed jars and slathered on cloths, riding the backs of camels, the bellies of ships, and the silk-lined chests of ambassadors. Tonight you trail Egyptian perfume beyond its borders, watching it become a diplomatic tool, a luxury import, and sometimes a cause for envy. Picture this, it's around 1400 BCE. You're in a Mycenaean port city on the Aegean coast. Bronze Age sailors are unloading a shipment, and among the pottery and wine amphorae is something a little more delicate. A beautifully sealed alabaster jar, its contents labelled in ink. It's a perfume from Thebes, likely myrrh-based, mixed with sweet wine and lotus. The Greek merchant opens it, cautiously dips a cloth in, and inhales. His face lights up. He's smelled nothing like it before. Back home, they're still crushing herbs into olive oil. But this is art. Egyptian perfume was a big deal in international trade. Foreign rulers practically begged for it. Letters from the Amarna archive, those baked clay diplomatic tablets from the reign of Akhenaten, include multiple requests from other kings for Egyptian oils and incense. Send more of that fine unguent, one ruler pleads, the kind your women wear. You get the sense that perfume wasn't just an export, it was Egypt's way of flexing on the world stage. And it wasn't just Mycenae. Egyptian perfumes show up in the Levant, in Mesopotamia, in Nubia. Some even travelled as far as the Indus Valley, where merchants swapped spices and resins in exchange for oils and minerals. It's like an ancient version of niche fragrance brands going viral. Everyone wanted a piece of the Nile's aromatic mastery, but exporting perfume wasn't just about sales, it was about reputation. When Egypt sent perfume, it was essentially sending prestige. A vial of Kai-Fi wasn't just a gift, it was a statement. It said, "We have mastered the elements, blended time into oil, and made the gods sigh with pleasure." No wonder pharaohs included perfume in their diplomatic packages. Hatshepsut, the famous female pharaoh, commissioned an entire expedition to the land of Punt just to secure more frankincense and myrrh trees. She even brought back the trees, roots and all, planting them in her mortuary temple like a botanical flex. You wander now through a warehouse on the Red Sea coast. Jars of precious oil are packed in straw, ready for shipment. The workers seal them with linen and resin. You can smell it even here, pungent, sticky sweet. These jars are destined for Byblos, where local priests will burn them in temple ceremonies, perhaps even claiming them as gifts from their own gods. Egyptian perfume wasn't just consumed, it was copied, rebranded, even mythologized. In Ugarit, scribes adopted Egyptian recipes, tweaking them with local ingredients. Think of it as the ancient world's take on a dupe. But here's the twist. As Egyptian perfume spread, so did Egypt's image. Foreigners associated the Nile with opulence, with spiritual power, with a kind of mysterious sensuality. A woman wearing Egyptian perfume was not just fragrant, she was cosmopolitan, sophisticated, possibly even magical. Some cultures even believed Egyptian scents could repel demons or ensure fertility. Whether that was clever marketing or genuine belief, well, historians still argue about that. Even Egyptian-style vessels became fashionable abroad. Those elegant coal-shaped bottles, often carved from alabaster or blue glass, started showing up in foreign tombs. Sometimes they held local perfumes, but often they were empty, kept as status symbols like someone today framing an empty designer perfume box on their vanity. The bottle alone was enough to impress. And then, of course, there were the imitations. Not everyone could afford the real deal, so merchants began creating knockoffs, using cheaper oils, local flowers, even artificial colorants to make their blends look and smell Egyptian. This led to a kind of ancient black market, where discerning buyers had to sniff carefully and sometimes burn a drop or two to test for authenticity. You can almost imagine a weary merchant muttering, "Don't trust the guy with the blue glass jars, he cuts his lotus oil with fish fat." Still, some copies were quite good, and in a strange way this only expanded Egypt's influence. Even counterfeit Egyptian perfume spread its scent across the ancient world. It was a compliment, if not always a legal one. And then came the real perfume addicts, the Romans. When Egypt eventually fell under Roman control, its perfumes became the stuff of legend. Roman aristocrats imported oils by the barrel. Cleopatra, whether the stories are true or just romantic embellishment, was said to have soaked the sails of her ships in perfume so that Mark Antony would smell her arrival before seeing her. That's how deeply embedded fragrance was in her personal brand. You see perfume not just as a sensory pleasure, but as political theatre, a way to dominate not by sword or gold, but by the lingering curl of lotus in the air, and that influence continued. Long after the New Kingdom crumbled, and long after the perfume workshops along the Nile fell silent, the mystique of Egyptian scent lived on in Greek medical texts, Roman recipe scrolls and medieval trade manuals. You can still find references to the Egyptian method in early Arabic perfumery treatises and Renaissance alchemy books. Even when the jars were empty, the idea lingered. What's wild is that we're still trying to reconstruct those original recipes. Modern perfumers, archaeologists and chemists have teamed up, attempting to recreate Kai-Fi and other blends using clues from tomb inscriptions, residue analysis, and ancient texts. Some results are beautiful, others less so. Turns out 3,000-year-old taste is not always compatible with modern noses, but the fact that we're still trying? That says something. These weren't just scents, they were cultural signatures, and when they drifted out of Egypt and across the ancient world, they carried stories, beliefs, even dreams with them. So as you sit now, drifting in your own way across time, imagine opening one of those sealed jars, still fragrant after millennia. You inhale, and in that breath, you're in Thebes, in Ugarit, in Athens, in Rome. You're everywhere perfume has touched. Its travel, its diplomacy, It's memory in a bottle. The scent travels across empires, but let's now step behind the curtain, to the places where it was actually made. The perfume jars didn't just appear fully formed in palaces and tombs. They were born in humble, hot, often smoke-filled rooms where knowledge was whispered and recipes guarded like treasure. You're entering the ancient perfume workshop, not a serene spa, but more like a mad alchemist's lab. If the alchemist also moonlighted as a chef, healer, and part-time priest. Imagine the walls first, stone or mud brick, blackened with years of incense smoke. The floor is dusty, scattered with broken bits of pottery, resin chunks, and tools that wouldn't look out of place in a modern chemistry set. Mortars and pestles, copper stills, flasks of oil, linen cloths stained in every imaginable colour. In the centre, a fire pit, low and steady, heating the base oils in clay pots. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you. Ancient Egypt is considered one of the earliest civilizations to practice true perfumery. Not just smear some flower juice on your arm, perfumery, but deliberate multi-stage distillation and infusion. This wasn't guesswork. Recipes were written down, refined, passed along. And while we're not sure exactly how secretive these workshops were, many scholars believe that knowledge of scent making was held within elite guilds or temple-adjacent groups. Some even say only priests could access the full recipes, especially for sacred blends like kefi. Others argue that there were also secular workshops catering to royalty and the wealthy, operating independently from temples. The debate continues. So who worked in these places? You picture a line of silent monks maybe, but in truth, it was likely a mix of skilled artisans, apprentices, and maybe even enslaved labour. The master perfumer, think of him as a cross between a modern-day nose and a wizard, would oversee everything. He could identify 40 resins blindfolded. He knew how long to soak blue lotus before it turned bitter. He might be able to cure a headache with one balm and knock out knocks with another. The process itself was long. Take, for example, the making of a basic floral oil. You don't just mash flowers into fat and call it a day. You start by choosing your oil base, castor, moringa or olive. Then you steep the chosen flower, say jasmine, in that oil under sunlight for days, even weeks. You strain it, add more fresh petals, and repeat. Over and over. This method, called enfleurage, was painfully slow but produced deeply saturated oils. By the end, one drop of the final product could scent a whole body. Then there were the resins, frankincense, myrrh, benzoin, labdanum. These were harder to work with. They had to be ground down, sometimes soaked in wine or heated with honey, to release their aromas. In some recipes they were mixed with raisins, dates, or even animal fats to create solid perfume cakes. Others required distillation using basic stills, essentially steaming the material and catching the condensed droplets of essence. The equipment was rudimentary, yes, but astonishingly effective. Fragrance wasn't just coaxed from plants, it was wrestled out with sweat and fire. One quirky tidbit: some perfumes were made seasonally. There were summer blends, lighter, fruitier, and winter blends thick with resin and musk. Priests even scheduled kefi production according to the lunar calendar. Why? Well, partly for ritual reasons, but also for practical ones. Some ingredients behaved differently depending on humidity or temperature. The blue lotus, for example, gave off a stronger scent when harvested just before sunrise. It wasn't just perfume, it was plant psychology. And yes, even perfumes had expiration dates. The Egyptians knew that some blends turned after a year or two. To combat this, they'd add stabilizers like honey, wine, or tree sap. Or they'd bury the jars in cool sand to extend shelf life. Imagine a luxury face cream being aged like wine beneath the desert floor. This wasn't chemistry as we know it, but it wasn't guesswork either. They learned through time, failure, and generations of trial and error. You run your fingers over a chunk of myrrh resin, the edges sticky even after thousands of years. This very material may have once been weighed on a copper scale, crushed with a mortar, steeped in wine, and added to an oil for Queen Tea herself. Somewhere between raw tree sap and bottled perfume is a long, hot process that smells like heaven and feels like manual labour. The workshop also smelled intense. Not delicate like the finished perfumes, but pungent, chaotic, like walking into a spice bazaar during a sandstorm. There was smoke from burning wood and resin. the sweet sharpness of crushed herbs, the oily tang of macerated seeds, all of it together would make your eyes water, and yet you'd get used to it. You'd learn to breathe through your nose, filter the layers, and know by scent alone if a batch was going wrong. Even tools mattered. Certain woods were favoured for stirring. Cedar, for example, didn't react with acidic ingredients. Linen cloth was used to strain oils, and the thread count could affect how fine the filtration was. Bronze knives were preferred for cutting roots, as they resisted corrosion. And every tool had to be cleaned obsessively. One contaminated batch could ruin a whole season's work. Now, a moment of drama. Picture an apprentice accidentally knocking over a nearly finished jar of kai-fi. That's weeks of work, hundreds of drachmas in lost ingredients, and the master perfumer turning a colour not found in nature. Ancient workshops weren't peaceful. They were high-stakes pressure cookers. One misstep and your career might be over. Or at least you'd spend the next year hauling buckets and crushing seeds in the sun. Still, it was sacred work. Every drop carried memory, meaning, and sometimes even magic. There are records of perfumers being buried with their tools, or honoured with titles like Overseer of the House of Ointments. You don't get that kind of status just by making people smell nice. These were scent artists, scent physicians, scent magicians. And all of this knowledge, every technique, every formula was passed down in whispers and scribbles. Papyrus scrolls, wall inscriptions, maybe even sung orally, like recipes turned into lullabies. Some of it made it through the centuries, most didn't. Which is why modern perfumers are still guessing at the exact ratios, trying to reverse engineer history from a few waxy traces left on broken jars. So when you dab on a little oil tonight, remember, someone, thousands of years ago, stood in a heat-choked room grinding frankincense until their hands ached. They did it for gods, for lovers, for kings, for memory, for you. By now, you've watched oils soak in sunlight, followed perfume jars across continents, and peeked into the smoky depths of ancient workshops. But tonight, you're shifting your focus from the makers to the wearers, from the hands that mixed the scent to the skin that wore it. Because in ancient Egypt, perfume wasn't just luxury, it was identity, social status, mood, religion, even seduction, all communicated through scent. Let's start at the top of the pyramid, literally. Pharaohs weren't just covered in gold and lapis, they were layered in perfume from scalp to soul. Think of it as the ancient version of layering colognes, only with more symbolism and way more preparation. Royal perfuming was not a quick spritz before leaving the palace, it was a ritual. The body was cleansed in scented waters. Oils were applied in a precise sequence. Specific blends were reserved for coronations, others for public appearances, still others for temple visits. Every scent told a story. Power, divinity, fertility, protection. And it wasn't just about smelling pleasant. Egyptians believed that perfume had spiritual resonance. Fragrance wasn't just for you, it was for the gods. A scented pharaoh was a holy one. The kifi you keep hearing about? It was said to please the gods not only through its smell, but through the process of its making. The very act of blending ingredients was a form of worship. So, when the pharaoh walked past, trailed by a breeze of blue lotus and frankincense, it wasn't just political power you sensed, it was cosmic order. Priests were similarly saturated. You picture a white-robed figure entering a temple, the scent of myrrh and cinnamon clinging to the folds of his linen. Priests cleansed their bodies multiple times a day. They anointed themselves before prayers, during offerings, even when sweeping the temple floor. The gods, after all, had standards. One particularly vivid inscription warns, "Do not approach the shrine if your breath is sour or your armpits stink." Subtle. Then there were the upper-class women. Let's be honest, this is where things get interesting. You imagine reclining on a cushioned chair, your braided hair perfumed with spikenard, your neck gleaming with scented oil, your earrings swaying as you fan yourself lazily while servants bring grapes and gossip. These women weren't just wearing perfume, they were curating an entire scented presence. One popular item? Perfume cones. Now here's the fringe fact of the night. For a long time, historians weren't even sure perfume cones were real. You see them in Egyptian art, pointed cones balanced on people's heads, often shown melting slightly, as if made of wax. But no physical evidence had ever been found. Were they symbolic, decorative, actual scent devices? scholars debated for decades. Then, in 2019, archaeologists uncovered 2 actual cones, made of a kind of scented wax, at the ancient city of Amarna. Vindication at last. Turns out, yes, people actually wore these things on their heads. Slowly melting, they would release fragrance over hours, like an ancient air freshener attached to your hairdo. Stylish, messy, delightfully extra. Even children wore perfume. Some inscriptions describe scented amulets worn for protection. Others mention oils used in daily care routines. Think baby lotion, but made of marula and honey. It wasn't all about glamour. Fragrance was also hygiene. In a world without deodorant or hot showers, scented oils served as moisturizer, cleanser, bug repellent and social buffer. Of course, not everyone wore perfume. Or rather, not everyone wore the good perfume. Common folk might scrape together enough to buy a tiny jar of basic oil, probably mixed with herbs like marjoram or thyme. But the luxury blends? Those were for the elite. That doesn't mean the working class didn't enjoy scent. It just meant they had to get creative. Brewing their own blends, infusing old oil with new petals, or repurposing temple incense as body balm. You know, DIY before it was cool. Still, perfumes trickled down. Leftover oil from temple rituals might be sold or redistributed. Fragrant flowers grew wild near the Nile, and during festivals, especially during the great feasts of Hathor or Opet, perfume was everywhere. People lit incense in the streets, splashed water infused with rose or mint, and sometimes even received scented cloths as temple gifts. For a few days a year, even the poorest villager might carry the scent of a god. And speaking of gods, don't forget them. Perfume was part of divine fashion. Statues were anointed daily. Their shrines were perfumed with incense and oil. You can picture a priest carefully dabbing perfume on a gold statue's forehead, muttering prayers with every motion. The gods didn't just demand offerings, they expected ambience. Their temples smelled divine because, in Egyptian theology, smell was a conduit to the sacred. A well-scented god was a well-fed god. It all feeds into a powerful idea. To wear perfume in ancient Egypt was to participate in a layered ritual of beauty, status, and spirituality. And sometimes, a little flirting. Egyptian love poetry is filled with fragrance references. Lines like, "Your scent is like myrrh upon my arm," or "I follow your smell like a garden path." Romantic? Sure. Cheesy? Definitely. But effective? Probably. In a world where physical contact was limited by decorum, scent was intimacy at a distance, a way of being remembered, even after someone walked away. There's one poem that describes a lover standing in the doorway just to breathe in the scent left behind by his beloved. You can feel that moment, the ache, the memory, the perfume that lingered like a ghost. And when death came, perfume followed. The deceased were anointed before burial, their wrappings soaked in resin, their tombs filled with jars of the oil. One particular mummy, known unofficially as the most fragrant corpse, still gives off a faint scent after 3,000 years. That's commitment. The hope was simple. If you smelled divine in life, maybe the gods would recognize you more easily in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether perfume had magical properties or was merely symbolic, but in ancient Egypt, those two categories weren't so separate. A pleasant scent could repel evil spirits. A drop of lotus oil might attract love or heal a wound. Perfume wasn't just part of a look, it was part of a worldview. So tonight, as you settle in, you might wonder, what scent would you choose if you lived back then? Something soft and floral to suggest innocence? A strong myrrh blend to signal power? Or maybe that head cone wax, melting quietly as you drift off into a dream of lotus fields and sunlit temples? Whatever your choice, remember this. Every scent you wear tonight, even the faintest hint on your skin or pillow, echoes a lineage of wearers stretching back millennia. Priests, queens, farmers, lovers, all of them walking through life with fragrance as their secret language. And now, so do you. So far, you've wandered through perfume tombs and sunlit workshops, eavesdropped on royal rituals, and even imagined the melting scent cones of festival goers. But let's press pause on all the sensory pageantry for a moment and turn to something quieter, something crisp and crackling. Parchment, papyrus, and the scribbled scrolls that tried to make sure those exquisite perfumes weren't forgotten. Tonight, you're diving into the ink and reed world of ancient record-keeping. how Egyptians captured the secrets of scent through writing, preservation, and a healthy dose of ritual. Because in Egypt, if it mattered, it got written down. You picture a small shaded room just off a temple's inner court. There's a low table, jars of black and red ink, and rows of scrolls neatly bundled with flax string. A scribe sits cross-legged, a reed pen tucked behind one ear, carefully copying an age-old formula. Not for taxation, or military orders, or divine prophecies. No, this scroll is all about fragrance. Ingredients, timings, quantities, symbolic prayers. This is no scented shopping list. It's half recipe, half religious rite. Let's take the famous Kaifi as our fragrant blueprint. It wasn't just a perfume, it was a process. Kaifi appears in multiple surviving texts, but most notably in the Temple of Edfu inscriptions. This version, etched directly onto stone, gives not only the list of ingredients but also the preparation method, timing, usually at night, and accompanying hymns. Imagine trying to make a batch of perfume and being told you had to sing a 6-verse chant before you were even allowed to stir. Welcome to Egyptian perfumery. According to that Edfu text, Kaifi included myrrh, cinnamon, mastic, henna, juniper berries, raisins, wine, honey, and several other ingredients we still struggle to identify. Not only that, the recipe said the ingredients had to be pounded separately, soaked at specific intervals, and added in a precise order. This was chemistry without beakers, pharmacology without pills, and theology without sermons. And the kicker? All of it was written down meticulously. But here's where things get interesting. While some of these recipes were carved into temple walls, safe from flood or fire, most were written on papyrus, a writing material made from pressed dried stalks of the papyrus plant. Flexible, portable, perfect for record keeping. But not exactly built to last a few thousand years in the average basement, which is why we have so few original perfume scrolls today. Still, those that survive are absolute gold, not just in what they say, but in what they imply. You find perfume-related recipes buried in medical texts like the Ebers, Papyrus, and Hurst Papyrus, which mostly focus on ailments and remedies, but often sneak in references to sweet-smelling ointments, to lift the heart, or to please the gods. One text, perhaps unintentionally adorable, recommends a balm to make the armpits agreeable, using a blend of fragrant resins and oils, ancient deodorant essentially. Then there are the papyri and inscriptions that include more, shall we say, imaginative ingredients. Crocodile fat, ostrich yolk, essence of sky. Historians still argue whether these were metaphorical, magical, or the scribes were just messing with their apprentices. Probably all three. What's clear is that Egyptian scribes weren't just copying words, they were preserving entire experiences. The feel of an oil, the scent of a petal, the correct moon phase to begin distillation. It's part science, part alchemy, part superstition. But each line on the scroll acts like a time capsule, not just of ingredients, but of thought. And it didn't end with the Egyptians. When the Greeks and later the Romans entered Egypt, they became obsessed with its fragrance industry and the knowledge that sustained it. Many of Egypt's aromatic recipes were translated into Greek, absorbed into the Hellenistic medical and alchemical traditions, and later echoed in the works of Roman authors like Pliny the Elder, who devotes entire pages to describing Egyptian perfumers and their scented temples. It's easy to picture a scroll being copied, handed from one scholar to another, then carried across the sea to Athens or Rome. It's less easy, but more poetic, to imagine that the scent of the original recipe lingered faintly on the papyrus as it travelled. One of the more fascinating survivors from this intellectual handoff is a figure named Zosimos of Panopolis, a 3rd century alchemist from Upper Egypt. Zosimos wrote extensively about perfume, distillation, and something akin to what we now call essential oils. He described devices to capture fragrance through heat, the mixing of scents with metals, and even the symbolic transformation of the soul through scent. His work blends Egyptian ritualism with Greek scientific inquiry, a kind of cultural perfume itself. And let's not forget the Islamic Golden Age. After Egypt became part of the expanding Muslim world, much of its knowledge, including perfume lore, was preserved in Arabic medical and alchemical texts. Scholars like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, improved on Egyptian distillation methods and wrote about the medicinal value of rosewater and musk. And yes, Egyptian techniques were part of that legacy. When you read a 10th century Arabic text on aromatics, you're hearing the distant echo of a scribe in Thebes hunched over a papyrus scroll centuries earlier. But back to those original scrolls. You may be wondering, how did they keep track of these recipes over generations? After all, Egypt didn't have publishing houses or PDF backups. Instead, temples acted as information banks. A select few scribes, usually trained from a young age, would specialize in ritual recipes, those used for embalming, offerings, incense, and perfume. Their job wasn't just to copy. They had to understand, to explain, to teach. Which means, yes, there were perfumery schools, or at least temple classes where apprentices were drilled in measurements, timing, and symbolic pairings. Some scholars believe the House of Life, the educational wing of temples, taught not only language and theology but also the art of scent. Makes sense, doesn't it? In Egypt, writing wasn't a dry skill, it was magical technology. Every ink stroke carried weight. Every scroll could shape a ceremony, cure a headache, or summon a god. And that's the real marvel. Perfume in Egypt wasn't just about what you smelled. It was about what was remembered. You imagine a young scribe practicing his hieroglyphs late into the night, copying a formula passed down for 300 years. He doesn't know if anyone will read it again. But he copies it anyway. Carefully. Reverently. Maybe even humming that Kifi hymn as he works. Now fast forward to the present. That same formula, buried in a tomb, half burned in a temple fire, salvaged by archaeologists, reconstructed by historians, ends up in a modern perfume lab. A chemist in Paris or Tokyo adds just a touch of that ancient blend to a new designer fragrance. And somewhere, in a department store you barely noticed, someone sprays it on their wrist and inhales. And for a split second, unknowingly, they share a breath with an Egyptian priest from 2,000 years ago. You can almost smell the papyrus now, feel the weight of the inked reed in your fingers. What will you write if you had your own scroll? What blend would you preserve? Let the scent linger. By now you've wandered the perfumed paths of scribes, temples, and tombs. You've smelled the echoes of the past, through scrolls, resins, oils, and myth. But tonight, let's pull back the curtain on something even deeper, something more elusive, the intimate rituals of the people. Not just queens or priests or embalming specialists, but the everyday Egyptians, farmers, weavers, brewers, and bead makers who found their own ways to live with scent. Because here's a truth most history books gloss over. In ancient Egypt, fragrance wasn't just a luxury. It was life hygiene, spiritual practice, social code, and personal expression, all rolled into one. You start the night as a humble villager, rising before dawn. Your home is made of sun-baked mud brick, soft underfoot, warm like an oven. There's no indoor plumbing, no marble baths, no hand soap scented with cucumber melon. But you still need to face the day clean, fresh, and appropriately scented. So, what do? Well, first you wash, maybe with a splash of river water or from a clay jar set out the night before. You rub down with natron, that salty, chalky substance you've seen in embalming rituals. But here, it acts like baking soda, absorbing sweat, killing bacteria, giving you that squeaky clean feeling. Ancient Egyptians didn't distinguish between spiritual and bodily cleanliness. To them, both were part of the same cosmic balance. Then comes the oil. You take a bit of perfumed castor or moringa oil and rub it into your scalp, chest, maybe even between your toes if it's a festival day. This isn't just to smell nice. It keeps your skin supple in the dry heat, protects against sun, and might just earn you a second glance at the market. The oil is scented with whatever's available. Frankincense, marjoram, sweet rush, or lotus if you're lucky. The wealthy have more exotic blends, of course. But even the poor know how to make the basics shine. You tie on a linen wrap, adjust your beaded collar, and before stepping outside, place a small scented wax cone atop your head, if it's a feast day. It'll melt slowly through the morning, perfuming your hair and shoulders. Imagine modern deodorant had a soft focus, slow drip aesthetic. That's your vibe. Now walk with me through the marketplace. It's alive with smells. Not all of them pleasant. You dodge heaps of fish and goat dung, press past leatherworkers' boiling hides in clay pots. But around the corner, there it is, the scent stall. The perfumer here isn't a noble. She's a middle-aged woman with sun-lined skin and bright, clever eyes. In front of her sit tiny alabaster jars and blue-glazed coal pots filled with balms and unguents. She lets you sniff a pot of sacred lotus paste, earthy, with hints of cinnamon and citrus. Not cheap, but she tells you it'll help you sleep through the heat. You buy a thumbful, pack it in a scrap of cloth and promise to come back next week. She doesn't write anything down. She doesn't have to. She's memorized every blend. This is where mainstream history tends to go quiet. Ancient texts celebrate pharaohs and priests, but ordinary people, their scent lives through archaeology and guesswork. Historians still argue whether personal perfumes were handmade at home or purchased at market. Some say villagers probably pressed local herbs into oil with clay weights and stone mortars. Others think they relied more on trade, swapping eggs or cloth for ointments mixed by skilled artisans. What's clearer is this: scent had social meaning. To smell sweet was to signal that you were clean, worthy, alive in the eyes of the gods. Going to a party unscented was like showing up today without brushing your teeth. And on holy days, forget it. You douse yourself in enough myrrh to fog up a doorway. We even find references in love poetry. Oh yes, Egyptians were romantics. There's a poem in the Chester Beatty Papyrus where a lover says, "My beloved has come. The scent of her reaches me before her footsteps." And another, "She has perfumed herself with the oil of the sacred tree." Fragrance didn't just attract, it lingered in memory. But not all smells were welcome. Let's talk ritual scent taboos. For example, women in mourning were often expected to forgo perfume entirely. To smell good in the presence of death was seen as arrogant or impious. And if you were entering a sacred space, like a shrine or festival tent, you had to make sure your scent was appropriate. Certain blends were reserved for divine rituals, wearing temple incense on a casual outing. Social faux pas, my friend. That's like wearing a wedding dress to jury duty. And then there's the power of negative scent. You know how certain smells are used to ward off evil in some cultures? Same here. The poor sometimes smeared their doorframes with onion or garlic paste to keep away demons. Some desert nomads even carried pungent amulets made of animal fat or ash to protect themselves on long journeys, whether it worked or not. Well, you try telling a sandstorm spirit to go away. One strange little tidbit. There's evidence that some Egyptian men, particularly soldiers, used a kind of pre-battle cologne, a mix of acacia sap, palm wine and resin, believed to embolden the spirit and confuse enemy forces. Picture that. 2 battalions charging toward each other, and you get hit by a wall of sweet-smelling smoke. Terrifying and oddly pleasant. And here's a quiet moment. Imagine a mother tucking her child in at night, anointing their forehead with a drop of oil as a bedtime blessing. No scrolls mention it. No temple wall records it. But somewhere, in a small house near the Nile, it happened 1,000 times over. Not for magic, not for worship, just for love. You begin to realize perfume wasn't separate from daily life. It was stitched into the fabric of it. There was no clean split between sacred and secular, ritual and routine. To be Egyptian was to smell of something, to walk through scent, speak with scent, even die with scent. And while perfumes for the gods and royalty have made their way into museums, the humble pots of everyday balms and body oils have mostly vanished, lost to time, absorbed into soil, shattered and swept away by sandstorms. But the idea of them? The suggestion of a child reaching for a scented jar, a bride oiling her hair before her wedding, a traveller rubbing myrrh into cracked heels, that lives on. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, imagine yourself back in that village, your skin oiled and warm, the air buzzing with evening insects, a faint breeze blowing through the reed door. Someone next door is grinding herbs, someone else is laughing over wine, a mother is humming, a merchant is closing up shop scenting her last customer, and above it all the stars, slowly wheeling across a sky that smells faintly of frankincense. You've been travelling with me through the fragrant heart of ancient Egypt, drifting through temples, markets and quiet homes, and now it's time to venture into something a bit more mysterious, the ancient Egyptians' relationship with scents as medicine. Because if you thought perfumes were just about smelling nice or making gods happy, think again. For them, scent was a potent medicine, sometimes their only medicine. Picture yourself as an ancient Egyptian healer, a kind of herbalist mixed with a priest, surrounded by clay jars filled with sticky resins, crushed flowers, and oils dripping thick as honey. You're not just whipping up perfumes here, you're crafting remedies designed to heal bodies, soothe spirits, and even, some say, ward off curses. One of the most famous examples is the Ebers Papyrus, a medical scroll dating back over 300-500 years, filled with hundreds of recipes for ailments ranging from stomach aches to snake bites. But embedded among the prescriptions are countless references to fragrant substances. Frankincense, for example, isn't just incense, it's recommended for wounds and inflammation. Myrrh isn't just for embalming, it's prescribed for ulcers and infections. The lines between medicine and magic blur into a fragrant fog. You imagine the healer chanting softly, grinding resins into powder, mixing them with water or oil, and anointing a patient's wound with the aromatic paste. The smell would be strong, almost overpowering, but it carried meaning. Cleanliness, power, and divine protection all rolled into one. Interestingly, many of these healing recipes relied on complex mixtures. Not just one or two ingredients, but a bouquet of plants and minerals combined in precise measures. This isn't your grandma's honey and lemon tea. This is ancient pharmacology in its most artful form. There's even evidence that Egyptians used distillation techniques. Yes, that very method of turning liquids into vapor and back, to extract essential oils long before Europe caught on. But the story gets weirder. Some of these scents weren't just about healing the body, they were about healing the soul. In Egyptian thought, illness could be caused by malevolent spirits or the anger of gods, so treatments included perfumes and incense believed to cleanse and restore spiritual balance. The use of aromatic fumigation, burning certain resins to purify a room or a person, was common in ritual healing. You can almost see the healer stepping outside a patient's hut, lighting frankincense on a little altar, waving the fragrant smoke in slow circles. The patient breathes in deep, feeling the sting of the smoke, but also the promise of relief. In these moments, scent isn't just a smell, it's a symbol of hope. Historians still argue whether some of these healing perfumes actually had medical efficacy, or if they were mainly placebo-enhanced by ritual. Maybe a bit of both. After all, many modern essential oils have antiseptic properties, so the Egyptians might have stumbled upon real science, even if their explanations were steeped in spirituality. And the medicinal use of perfumes wasn't limited to humans. Archaeological evidence suggests that Egyptians also applied scented oils to animals, especially horses and cats, as part of health and grooming routines. There's a cute fringe theory that some pet perfumes were used to mask odours from wild predators, or to calm animals during stressful times. Whether that's true or not, the image of a scented feline roaming the Nile Delta feels oddly comforting. But not all perfume-based remedies were gentle. Some balms included ingredients like lead, arsenic or mercury, substances that would make any modern doctor run screaming. Ancient Egyptians, of course, didn't know about toxicity the way we do, so the line between cure and poison was thin, and sometimes deadly. Then there's the world of cosmetics, overlapping with medicine. Eye makeup made from malachite and galena was often mixed with aromatic oils to reduce infection. The famous green and black kohl weren't just for style, they had antibacterial properties, and their fragrance may have added an invisible shield against flies and dirt. This brings you to another fascinating point: perfume's role in personal hygiene and disease prevention. In a hot climate like Egypt's, with flies buzzing and disease spreading, smelling good was not just about vanity but survival. Scents helped mask body odours and possibly deter insects, making perfumes a kind of early public health measure. You imagine ancient marketplaces bustling with vendors selling fragrant ointments labelled as both beautifiers and protectors. Some would have been cheap, others reserved for the elite. The price of fragrance was a statement of social status and access to health. It wasn't all roses and myrrh, though. Some treatments, while fragrant, were unpleasant in use. Take the infamous garlic and onion paste used to treat respiratory issues, smelling awful but valued for its effectiveness. Or the burnt incense powders sprinkled around sick beds to drive out evil spirits. By this point, you're beginning to understand how deeply intertwined scent was with Egyptian life. Not just pleasure, but survival and spirituality too. The complexity and sophistication of their perfumed remedies would influence medical traditions for centuries to come. Even today, aromatherapy owes a debt to these ancient pioneers who first glimpsed the healing potential in nature's fragrances. So next time you dab a scented balm on a sore throat or light an incense stick to calm your mind, remember, you're part of a lineage stretching back thousands of years, to a healer's hut on the Nile, you've already experienced the fragrant world of ancient Egypt, where perfumes filled temples and marketplaces alike, weaving a rich tapestry of scents that marked everyday life. Now you're invited to dive even deeper into the intimate realm of beauty and personal care, the luxurious, elaborate and surprisingly practical ways Egyptians use scent as part of their daily grooming rituals. This isn't just about smelling nice for company. Fragrance was a fundamental layer of their identity, intertwined with health, status and even spiritual power. Imagine yourself waking up at dawn in an Egyptian home, perhaps in a modest village by the Nile or a grand house, with views over the river's misty waters. The air is cool and still, and before you begin your day's tasks there is a ritual to perform, a sacred sensory routine that blends function with delight. Your hands reach for a carved alabaster jar, cool to the touch, filled with fragrant oils. These oils are precious concoctions, mixtures of pressed flowers, resins and spices like jasmine, lotus, cinnamon and myrrh that will anoint your skin and hair, transforming you from night's rest to daytime presence. The first, and perhaps most iconic element of Egyptian beauty is kohl, the black eyeliner that frames your eyes in bold strokes. But kohl was much more than a cosmetic. It was a multi-purpose medicine and shield. Made from powdered galena or malachite mixed with fragrant oils and resins, it soothed irritated eyes, warded off infections, and shielded the skin around your eyes from harsh sunlight and gnats. The faint aroma of frankincense and myrrh mingled with the slight bitterness of the mineral powder each time you blinked. This simple, scented application was both a practical defense and a striking aesthetic statement, worn by men and women alike. Next, you move to your skin. The dry Egyptian climate can be merciless, so you gently rub a blend of nourishing oils, almond, castor or moringa, infused with aromatic resins into your body. These oils hydrate your skin, create a barrier against dust and heat, and leave behind a delicate, lingering scent that announces your presence before you even speak. Perfumes here were not an afterthought but an essential part of daily hygiene and protection. Every movement you make releases a whisper of jasmine, lotus or cinnamon, marking you as someone who cares deeply for both appearance and well-being. Hair care was another carefully attended ritual. Whether you sported a simple cut or wore a wig intricately braided and decorated with gold and beads, your hair was treated with scented balms made from beeswax, oils and resins. These balms kept hair soft and fragrant, masking any odours and signalling status and refinement. The subtle scent of lotus or myrrh lingered, a signature of personal style and grooming. Imagine running your fingers through hair that carries the cool, sweet perfume of the Nile's blossoms. But the role of fragrance extended beyond the living. Egyptians believed in preparing the dead for the afterlife, and cosmetics and perfumes were vital parts of funerary customs. Archaeologists have uncovered cosmetic kits buried with mummies, complete with small perfume vials. This wasn't just about preserving beauty, it was about preserving identity and ensuring a fragrant, purified passage to the next world. Fragrance became a bridge between life and death, a way to maintain dignity and spiritual cleanliness. Here's a quirky twist. Some researchers suggest Egyptians used toothpaste-like pastes, made from crushed mint, myrrh and shell powder, to clean their teeth and freshen breath. Early signs that scent was integrated even into oral hygiene. Imagine that. In a bustling ancient marketplace, a merchant might advertise fragrant tooth powders just as zealously as scented oils. Of course, there's an ongoing debate among historians about how widespread these scented cosmetics were. Were these perfumes and oils exclusive to the elite, pharaohs, nobles, priests, or did common people also enjoy their fragrant benefits? Some evidence suggests village folk made simpler, more rustic scented ointments from local herbs, but the rich, layered perfumes with rare spices and resins were probably reserved for those with wealth and status. Still, fragrance's allure seems universal, a thread connecting all levels of society. And here's a playful fringe fact. The Egyptians didn't just perfume themselves, they perfumed their pets too. Traces of aromatic oils have been found on mummified cats, which leads to the charming idea that feline companions once padded softly through scented rooms, perhaps bearing a hint of lotus or cinnamon themselves. Whether to calm the animals or simply because their owners loved them, this practice hints at a surprisingly modern bond between humans, pets and scent. All of this brings home a clear truth. In ancient Egypt, scent was more than a mere luxury or a pleasant addition to life. It was a language of identity, power, and care. Perfume and cosmetics work together to communicate who you were and what you hope to project: health, status, divine favour, or allure, without uttering a word. So as you settle under your covers tonight, imagine the soft scent of jasmine and myrrh filling a Nile-side home, the carefully painted eyes of an Egyptian woman catching the morning light, the slow ritual of oils warmed between fingers and drawn through hair. These rituals link us to a past that is fragrant, vivid, and deeply human, reminding us that caring for how we present ourselves has always been part of the story of civilization. You find yourself stepping once again into the fragrant world of ancient Egypt, but this time deeper, into the very heart of their perfume craft. This isn't just about smelling nice, it's about the art, the science, and the culture behind scents that shaped identities, religion, and trade for thousands of years. Imagine a workshop alive with heady aromas, where the ancient Egyptians were pioneers of perfume making, refining techniques that echo through time. Picture yourself as a young apprentice perfumer in a sunlit room near the Nile, the air thick with the scent of crushed flowers like lotus and jasmine. Around you, the rich, resinous aromas of frankincense and myrrh burn slowly in small burners, adding layers of warmth and mystery. Bronze vessels simmer gently on small fires, their contents releasing fragrant vapours that fill the space. On shelves, alabaster jars and clay pots stand ready, each filled with precious oils and pastes, carefully mixed with spices imported from distant lands. Your hands move with practiced precision, blending drops of aromatic oils, your senses attuned to every nuance of scent. One well-known fact: the Egyptians developed early methods to extract essential oils that resemble primitive distillation techniques. They used gentle heating and condensation to capture pure essences from flowers and resins without destroying their delicate fragrant compounds. This allowed them to produce concentrated perfumes far richer and longer lasting than simple infusions or crushed petals. Here's a quirky tidbit. Papyrus scrolls have been found containing detailed perfume recipes, sometimes written in poetic language. These ancient manuals describe how to blend fragrant oils with animal fats or beeswax to create solid perfumes and ointments, early versions of scented cosmetics. These recipes reveal a sophisticated knowledge of ingredients and their combinations passed down through generations, almost like the first perfume cookbooks. The trade networks for these ingredients were vast and complex. Egypt did not grow frankincense or myrrh locally. These precious resins came from the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa. Camel caravans and ships transported these rare substances across deserts and seas to Egypt, fueling a thriving perfume industry. This trade connected Egypt with Nubia, the Levant, and even as far as the Indus Valley, spreading fragrance and culture. Historians still debate the exact routes and systems of exchange, but it's clear that perfume was a prized commodity and a symbol of status and power. Some Egyptian perfumes were so rare and valuable they rivaled gold in worth. Pharaohs presented exquisite jars of perfume to foreign rulers as diplomatic gifts, essentially the ancient equivalent of VIP presents. These fragrant tokens could open doors and cement alliances, acting as a subtle form of political currency. Perfume was also vital in religion. Temples were filled with incense smoke and anointed statues, priests and sacred objects with scented oils believed to please the gods and maintain cosmic order. Certain oils were thought to have protective properties, guarding wearers against evil spirits and ensuring safe passage into the afterlife. A fascinating fringe theory suggests that the Egyptians practiced early aromatherapy by burning fragrant resins to promote healing and mental clarity. While scholars debate the extent of this, the idea that scent was used as a form of spiritual and physical therapy adds another layer of depth to the Egyptian perfume tradition. So, you see, Egyptian perfumery was much more than a luxury. It was a complex craft involving chemistry, art, spirituality, and commerce. The legacy of these ancient perfumers laid the foundation for the perfume industry as we know it today. As you relax and drift towards sleep, imagine those ancient workshops, thick with aromatic smoke and the gentle clinking of alabaster jars. The warm desert air carries the scent of lotus and myrrh, whispering stories of power, devotion, and humanity's enduring desire to turn nature's gifts into lasting beauty. You step into the lively, bustling world of ancient Rome, where perfume is not just a luxury for the elite. It is woven deeply into the daily lives of people from all social classes. As you walk down the crowded streets of Rome around the 1st century CE, your senses are immediately overwhelmed by a rich blend of fragrances drifting through the air. Imagine inhaling the sweet scents of lavender and rose mixed with the warm spiciness of cinnamon and myrrh. The aroma of burning incense mingles with the rare and mysterious odour of ambergris, a prized substance harvested from sperm whales, known for its uncanny ability to fix and prolong the scent of perfumes. Vendors shout their wares from crowded market stalls, jars of scented oils, boxes of fragrant resins, bundles of fresh flowers, and delicate glass bottles filled with perfumes. These glass containers are tiny works of art, often shaped like animals, gods, or mythological creatures, showcasing the craftsmanship and creativity of Roman glassmakers. In Roman society, owning such a perfume bottle was not just practical, but a clear statement of wealth, status, and taste. One indisputable fact about ancient Rome is that the Romans were masters of turning perfume production and trade into a massive industry. They imported rare raw ingredients from across their vast empire: Egyptian frankincense, Indian spikenard, Arabian spices, and African resins. This international network of trade routes brought exotic materials from far-flung corners of the world into the heart of Rome, allowing perfumers to create complex and alluring fragrances that captured the imaginations of their clientele. Roman glassmaking technology was revolutionary, enabling artisans to produce exquisite perfume bottles that were both functional and decorative. These vessels often featured intricate designs and were treasured possessions passed down through generations or gifted as tokens of esteem. Their fragile beauty enhanced the allure of the perfume inside, making the entire experience feel luxurious and special. Now here's a fascinating yet slightly strange fact. Some Roman perfumes contained unexpected ingredients that might make modern noses cringe. Perfumes could include crushed insects, powdered pearls, human hair, and even the secretions of certain animals. While these components might sound bizarre, the Romans believed they added magical properties or enhanced the longevity and complexity of the scents. Historians still debate the extent of these practices, but it's clear that Roman perfumers were fearless experimenters, blending chemistry, superstition, and artistry in their craft. Roman attitudes toward personal hygiene add another twist to the story. Despite the grandeur of the famous Roman baths, daily washing with soap was not common. Instead, many Romans relied on applying layers of scented oils to their bodies to mask natural odours. This practice often meant that fragrance acted as a substitute for cleanliness rather than a complement to it. By today's standards, this might seem unhygienic, but it reflects how cultural norms shape perceptions of what clean means. Religious rituals in Rome were inseparable from the use of fragrance. Temples constantly filled with the fragrant smoke of burning incense, offerings made to the gods in the form of aromatic resins and oils. Priests anointed statues and themselves with perfumed oils as acts of devotion and purification. Certain scents were associated with specific gods. For instance, the sweet, delicate scent of violets was linked to Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. Perfume thus held a sacred place in Roman spirituality, serving as a medium that connected mortals with the divine. The trade and commerce of perfume ingredients were extensive and complex. Large-scale importation involved ships crossing the Mediterranean and caravans traversing desert trade routes. These networks not only facilitated the movement of raw materials, but also the exchange of ideas, techniques, and cultural influences. Scholars continue to debate the exact details of these trade routes and the imperial control over them, but there's no question that perfume was a highly valued luxury item symbolizing power, wealth, and social standing. Imagine, as you prepare to drift into sleep, walking once more through the fragrant streets of ancient Rome. The mingling scents of ambergris, rose, cinnamon, and myrrh swirl around you, whispering tales of empire, devotion, artistry, and the pleasures of life. This fragrant world you've visited is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a reminder of the timeless human desire to create beauty, identity, and meaning through scent. You find yourself transported to the vibrant, opulent courts of the Mughal Empire in 16th century India, where perfume isn't just a pleasant scent but a fundamental part of life, an art, a science, and a statement of power. Imagine walking barefoot through immense gardens filled with roses, jasmine, and tuberose. The air here is dense with intoxicating fragrance, mixing with the warm Indian sun and the soft rustling of leaves. This is a world where scent shapes culture, politics, spirituality, and personal identity in ways you might not expect. The Mughals, descendants of Central Asian conquerors, became great patrons of the arts after establishing their empire across much of the Indian subcontinent. They were known for their exquisite taste in architecture, painting, poetry, and of course, perfumery. But the Mughals didn't just appreciate perfume, they cultivated it, innovated with it, and integrated it into everyday life and royal ceremony. Their imperial gardens were often planned specifically for the fragrance of the plants they contained. Flowers were harvested at dawn when their essential oils were most potent, and skilled perfumers worked to extract these aromas in ways that pushed the boundaries of existing technologies. One important historical fact is the Mughal Empire's development and perfection of distillation techniques, especially using the deg, a copper still that was key for extracting attar, the oil-based essential oils distilled from flowers. This method was an evolution of earlier practices from Persia and the Arab world, but the Mughals refined it, producing attars that were richer, purer, and longer lasting than before. Unlike alcohol-based perfumes common in Europe centuries later, attars are oil-based, meaning they evaporate slowly, allowing the scent to linger for hours, sometimes even days. Producing attar was an elaborate, labour-intensive craft. Pickers had to collect petals during the cool early hours, and then the distillation process required careful control of heat and timing to avoid ruining the delicate fragrance compounds. Master perfumers treated their work as a sacred art, passed down through generations in tight-knit workshops. Sometimes these perfumers were court officials, trusted not only with recipes, but with the symbolic meanings carried by each scent. A curious and less well-known detail is the use of rare and exotic materials to enhance the scents. For example, musk, secreted by the glands of the musk deer, was a prized fixative, making perfumes last longer on the skin. However, hunting musk deer was heavily regulated by the Mughal rulers, who understood the ecological dangers of overharvesting. This early form of wildlife conservation shows the empire's sophistication in managing natural resources. Other ingredients included ambergris, a waxy substance from the digestive system of sperm whales, and various spices like saffron and cardamom. These spices weren't just flavour enhancers in cuisine, they added warmth, complexity, and depth to attars, creating multi-layered aromatic experiences. Perfume wasn't just for personal pleasure, it was a symbol of social status and political power. The Mughal emperors and their courts used fragrance to assert their divinity and sophistication. Emperors wore specific scents that became associated with their reigns, and gifting attars was a diplomatic tool, a way to build alliances or show favour. You might be surprised to learn that even animals like horses and elephants were perfumed for ceremonies, enveloping the entire court in a fragrant aura. This total sensory immersion reinforced the grandeur and mystique of the Mughal elite. Yet historians still argue about the exact influence of Mughal perfumery beyond India's borders. There's evidence that trade routes, both overland and maritime, carried fragrant oils, and the knowledge of distillation westward, eventually reaching Persia, the Ottoman Empire, and Europe. But scholars debate whether European perfumers adopted Mughal techniques directly, or whether the influence was indirect, filtered through Middle Eastern intermediaries. What's undisputed is that the Mughal Empire's perfume culture represents one of the richest chapters in the history of fragrance. Beyond the science and politics, Mughal perfumery also carried deep spiritual and poetic significance. Sufi poets, whose work was beloved at the Mughal court, often used fragrance as a metaphor for divine love, spiritual purity, and the fleeting nature of life. The act of making and wearing perfume was seen not only as beautification, but as a kind of devotional ritual, connecting the wearer to the divine and the natural world simultaneously. This spiritual dimension adds a layer of richness that makes Mughal perfume culture stand apart from mere commercial or aesthetic pursuits. Now, think about this. The same rose you imagine smelling in a Mughal garden would have been harvested at dawn, distilled by a master perfumer, mixed with rare spices and musk, and then gently applied on the emperor's skin or garments. That scent would linger in the air during royal audiences, court poetry readings, or garden strolls, creating a sensory environment that was as much a part of the Mughal identity as their magnificent palaces or their richly embroidered robes. You're part of a long human story here, a journey stretching back thousands of years of trying to capture beauty, memory, and essence in a bottle. The Mughal tradition reminds us that perfume is more than a fleeting luxury. It's a bridge between nature and culture, between science and spirituality, between the individual and the cosmos. So next time you catch a whiff of rose or jasmine, remember this layered history. You're inhaling centuries of art, devotion, power, and mystery distilled into a tiny drop of fragrant oil, an invisible but profoundly human legacy. You step into Renaissance Europe, a world alive with art, science, and exploration, where the fragrance culture that once belonged to distant courts begins its dramatic transformation into a widespread phenomenon. The 15th and 16th centuries usher in a new era as Europe awakens from the medieval past and opens itself to global trade, ideas, and innovations. Picture yourself walking the lively streets of Venice, Florence, or Paris. Cities buzzing with merchants, nobles, and artists, all eager to embrace the luxuries and novelties flooding in from the east and beyond. Among these treasures is perfume, no longer a hidden secret of royalty, but a burgeoning symbol of social status, fashion, and diplomacy. Historically, the Renaissance marks a pivotal moment in perfumery's evolution, thanks largely to the introduction and refinement of alcohol-based perfumes. Though distillation was known earlier in the Islamic world and parts of Asia, its techniques reached Europe in fuller form during this time, coupled with the availability of strong alcohols like brandy and wine. This combination made possible perfumes that evaporated more quickly than the thick oil-based attars from the Mughal courts or the Middle East. The new alcohol-based scents offered lighter, fresher aromas that suited European tastes and lifestyles, allowing perfumes to be reapplied throughout the day and worn more liberally, thus broadening their use beyond court circles into the wider, merchant and noble classes. Perfumers of the Renaissance were not content to simply replicate old formulas. They became experimental artists and scientists. Traditional European favourites such as rose, lavender, and violet mingled with exotic spices, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, brought via expanding trade routes from Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Animal-derived fixatives like ambergris, a mysterious waxy substance produced by sperm whales, and civet, a secretion from a cat-like mammal, were prized for their ability to enhance and prolong scent longevity. Though these ingredients are controversial and largely replaced today, their use was a hallmark of luxury and craftsmanship in the Renaissance. Historians still debate how widespread these ingredients were, and whether their origins were common knowledge or carefully concealed secrets of the trade. Perfume rapidly became intertwined with politics and social status. Royal courts, such as that of Catherine de Medici in France, are famous for their obsession with fragrance. Catherine, an Italian princess who became Queen of France, is credited with popularizing perfume use in the French court by importing skilled Italian perfumers and commissioning unique scents for herself and her court. Wearing a particular perfume could signal loyalty, favor, or membership in elite circles, becoming a subtle tool in court intrigue and diplomacy. The right fragrance might open doors or sway opinions, making perfume a powerful yet invisible player on the political stage. Beyond symbolism, perfume served practical needs in an era of infrequent bathing and poor sanitation. The Renaissance was a time when people often relied on scent to mask unpleasant odours in crowded cities and during social events. Nobles carried perfumed gloves, handkerchiefs, and pomanders, small fragrant balls containing herbs and spices, to refresh themselves and keep foul smells at bay. These accessories became both fashion statements and hygienic necessities, further cementing perfume's role in daily life. The period also nurtured early scientific exploration of fragrance. Perfumers often doubled as apothecaries, classifying plants, flowers, and spices not only by scent, but also by their medicinal and therapeutic properties. Experimentation with distillation and extraction methods laid essential groundwork for modern chemistry and perfumery sciences. Yet many questions linger. Historians still argue over how deeply perfumers understood the chemical nature of their ingredients, and whether they were aware of potential health risks from prolonged exposure to some compounds. As you inhale this Renaissance world of sumptuous fabrics, lavish feasts, and delicate perfumes, it's clear fragrance was far more than decoration. It shaped identities, reinforced social hierarchies, and influenced political maneuvering. The story of perfume's journey, from the rich, spiritual atars of Mughal India to the light, volatile perfumes of Renaissance Europe, tells of cultural exchange, human creativity, and our timeless desire to capture beauty and memory in scent. Next time you catch the scent of rose or lavender, remember the generations of artisans and patrons who crafted these fragrances with devotion and ingenuity, an invisible legacy that still perfumes our world today. The perfume trail has taken you far, from crushed ostrich eggs and resinous Egyptian rituals to lavish Roman baths and medieval mysticism. And now, as you reach the final leg of this dreamy journey, you arrive in the late 1600s and 1700s, a time when scent, science, society and commerce collide in grand, fragrant fashion. This is the Enlightenment, yes, but it's also the age of powdered wigs, lace sleeves and gloves spritzed with bergamot oil. Perfume, once a mystical potion and then a royal indulgence, is now a sophisticated mass appeal art form, bursting out of alchemist labs and into the boudoir of the rising middle class. Picture yourself in Paris around 1720. The streets bustling with carriages and chatter, horse hooves clopping down cobblestones while delicate clouds of orange blossom and civet drift from open windows. The scent of perfume hangs in the air like a soft whisper of power. Paris isn't just the capital of fashion now, it's the perfume capital of the world. The city becomes the centre of an increasingly professionalised and commercialised fragrance industry, where perfumers are no longer obscure chemists tinkering in backrooms, but respected artisans with storefronts, clients, and advertisements printed on thick, scented parchment. These perfumers, known as nez or noses, take great pride in their creations. Some are even apprenticed like goldsmiths, undergoing years of training to develop a refined sense of smell. They spend days blending notes from imported ingredients, ambergris from Wales, myrrh from Arabia, lavender from Provence. Fragrance pyramids begin to emerge, top notes that greet you, middle notes that hold the heart, and base notes that linger. This layering of scent, now so common, is a revelation at the time. Perfume becomes not just something you wear, it's something you perform, something that unfolds like music over time. And here's the mainstream historical fact that seals this moment. In 1709, Giovanni Maria Farina creates what becomes known as Eau de Cologne, a bright citrusy blend of rosemary, lemon and neroli. It's light, refreshing, and perfect for the new modern man and woman who value hygiene and subtlety over the heavy, cloying scents of previous centuries. Cologne spreads across Europe like wildfire, eventually lending its name to the entire category of light-bodied perfumes. Now that cologne is flowing and noses training, the world of perfume also gets a little weird. This wouldn't be a proper sleepy history story without something unexpected. So let's talk about perfume gloves. Yes, gloves. Real leather ones, soaked in perfumes like jasmine, musk, or violet. During this time, France's glove makers and perfumers become so closely intertwined that King Louis XIV passes laws regulating who can make what. These gloves aren't just fashion accessories, they're status symbols, conversation starters, and occasionally olfactory nightmares. Some wore gloves reeking so strongly of musk and civet that passers-by gagged on the street. Others believed these perfumed accessories could ward off illness, as bad smells were still thought to carry disease. And speaking of Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, he's kind of a perfume addict. His court is saturated in scent. His fountains are said to flow with rosewater during special events, and he reportedly dabs perfume not only on his clothes, but also on furniture, walls, and even chandeliers. His palace at Versailles becomes the global epicenter of over-the-top fragrance culture. But the irony? The plumbing at Versailles is so bad that it reeks constantly. Hence, all that perfume. Historians still argue whether this obsession with scent was more about personal taste or a strategic cover-up of royal stink. Across Europe, perfume also begins to define gender, class and etiquette. Men dab lighter citrus blends or woodier tones to express refinement. Women choose florals and white musks that suggest both delicacy and social standing. Perfume becomes part of a larger grooming ritual involving powders, pomades, and the occasional aromatic handkerchief. Convenient when someone fainted from a corset that was too tight, or the odour of a fish market nearby. But don't mistake all this refinement for innocence. Perfume also becomes part of seduction, mystery, and sometimes espionage. Some love letters are scented, some poisons are hidden in flasks disguised as perfume bottles, and some believe that certain fragrances can make people fall in love, or at least fall into bed. It's the beginning of what would later become perfume advertising's most enduring message: wear this, and they won't be able to resist you. Commercially, perfume enters its golden age. Perfumers begin printing ornate labels and building signature brands. The first celebrity perfumes are born, not for movie stars, but for nobility. You can buy Eau de la Reine, or Essence de Madame Pompadour, and pretend just for a moment that you belong in a palace. Bottles become miniature sculptures, hand-painted glass, delicate stoppers, gold-foiled labels. A bottle of perfume isn't just something to dab behind the ears. It's a status item you show off on your vanity table. And for the first time, perfume becomes something you might gift someone, not just as a gesture of generosity, but to tell them something about how you see them. Science continues its march. Chemists begin to understand alcohol's ability to preserve and carry fragrance, and perfumers exploit this with creative abandon. Natural materials, some extremely rare, are still prized. But synthetic compounds are beginning to enter the scene. Vanillin, coumarin, and other synthetic ingredients make their quiet debut. They allow perfumers to replicate natural scents more affordably, or invent completely new ones. And while this excites some with dreams of accessibility and creativity, others see it as a betrayal of the pure botanical tradition. The natural versus synthetic debate is officially born, and yes, it's still going strong in today's fragrance world. Despite all this innovation, many still rely on perfume for very practical reasons. Remember, bathing is still a luxury or a rarity for most, so perfume is essential. It's used on wigs, gloves, letters, furniture, and even food. Some sprinkle rosewater on pastries, others perfume their wine. Yes, perfumed wine. Was it delicious or disgusting? Historians still argue about that too, and let's not forget the fringe believers, those who think certain scents ward off evil spirits or bad luck. The lines between medicine, magic, and fragrance remain blurred. Some wealthy households keep incense constantly burning to cleanse the air. Others place herbal sachets under pillows to encourage prophetic dreams. Your perfume, in this world, isn't just about smelling good, it's part of a grander system of belief, comfort, and ritual. By the time the 18th century closes, perfume has become something deeply embedded in modern life. It's an art, a science, a business, a social marker, a cultural export, and a personal signature. It no longer belongs solely to pharaohs, emperors, or queens. It belongs to you, to the everyday person with a nose, a sense of self, and a craving for beauty that lingers in the air. And as you lie back now, head nestled into your pillow, surrounded by the soft hum of sleep and the last invisible traces of your favourite scent, remember, every bottle tells a story. A story of deserts and palaces, apothecaries and Parisian shops, kings and commoners, all seeking the same thing, something beautiful and invisible to hold on to. That story ends with you.